number of different locations, but certainly in terms of San Diego, that's one of our best presentations and best partnerships that we have. We've been a part of the Giving Institute. Our firm has been a part of the Giving Institute for a number of years, which allows us to bring the Giving USA report to you. So what we're going to do first is go through the numbers. We'll talk a little bit about issues and trends and how that will impact your ongoing fundraising operations. And then how do you optimize giving in turbulent times? The report that we have is looking at giving in 2019, but we know that certainly 2020 is a very different reality than we had in 2019. So as we look at the Giving USA report for 2020, again, reflecting upon 2019 numbers, just a little bit of reminder of what Giving USA is. It's the longest annual running report on charitable giving in the United States. It began in 1956, and it's published by the Giving USA Foundation, which is a part of the Giving Institute, and prepared and written by the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. The project and the report is funded by the Giving Institute member firms, foundations, and other donors, including our firm, the Phoenix Philanthropy Group. So in 2019, we saw a return to growth. You may remember that 2018, we talked about the issues of uncertainty and complexity in that year with tax laws and other things changing significantly. But we saw and returned to growth in 2019. Philanthropy is at $449 billion overall, an increase of 4.2% over the previous year, and a new record high. We're going to discuss throughout the presentation today about why 2019 numbers are important, particularly given the challenges that we have in 2020, and whether 2019 was really the calm before the storm, and if it was, how do we make sure that we weather the storm in the most appropriate way? So again, giving is $449 billion. It's up 4.2%. You can see that individuals are responsible for 69%, foundations 17%, bequests 5%, and corporations, or bequests 10%, and corporations 5%. Overall, giving has been rather resilient and seen major increases over the last number of years, particularly since the Great Recession of 2008-2009. Since this period of 1979 through 2019, there were 3 years of decline. One was 1987, and again, the others were 2008-2009. The average growth rate in contributed income over this period of time was 6%. So the 4.2% growth we are seeing this year is a little behind the overall average. And as you look at total giving and look at the dollar amounts, the increase this year was $18.1 billion. The average increase is $10.6 billion. So while as a percentage we're a little under the run rate, in terms of the dollar amounts that we are ahead this year over previous years and average years. So if you look at the 1 and 2 year trends, you see that corporations have seen the most significant increase this year at 13.4%. That's followed by individuals at 4.7% and foundations at 2.5%. It's interesting to also look at the 2 year averages, and bequests increased over that 2 year period by 9.8%, followed by corporations at 9.5%. and foundations at 7%. So individual giving is up. It's up 4.7%. It's $309.66 billion. It's 69% of the overall total. This was largely led by high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals, and mega gifts and mega bequests of $300 million and above. One was Barron Hilton, which was $3.4 billion, Michael Bloomberg, $1.5 billion, Jim Walton, $1.2 million, and Pierre and Pam Omidyar at $470 million. In terms of foundations, they're up by 2.5% to total $75.69 billion. It's 17% of the total overall. And this looks at independent, operating, and community foundations. Operating foundations were up 1.3%. independent foundations up 2.2%, and the largest growth was in community foundations of 5.6%. As you look at family foundations, which are contained within this overall foundation number, 64% of independent foundations are family foundations, and family foundations comprise 46% of the overall total of foundations. That's $34.8 billion. So back to the slide when we were looking at the difference between individual giving, bequest giving, foundation, and corporate. When you add outright individual giving plus bequest plus private family foundations or individual foundations, the total goes up to 86% of giving from individuals. Bequests basically stayed the same. This can be a very volatile category. With one major mega gift can change this one quite significantly. But this year basically stayed the same. It's at $43 billion, and it is 10% of the total overall. Giving by corporations is up 13.4%. It is the largest increase that they've ever seen in terms of corporate giving. It's at $21 billion as a total, but remember, it's still only 5% of giving overall. As you look at this analysis from 1980 to 2019 in 5-year increments, you see again that it appears that individual giving has gone down from 82% to 70%. But again, when you add individuals, bequests, and family foundations, that goes up to 86%. So outright from individuals has seen a decline. Foundations has seen an increase. And corporations and bequests have basically stayed the same. Bequests at about 8% and corporations at about 5%. So where's the money going? You can see that number 1 is religion, which it has been for quite a long time. Number 2 is education at 14%. 3 is human services at 12%. And 4 is gifts to grant-making foundations, which is also 12%. The 1-year growth rate, the highest growth was in public society benefit. That increased by 13%, followed by arts, culture, and humanities at 12.6%. And then education, which has been strong for a number of years, saw a growth rate of 12.1%. That 2-year average saw arts leading the way at an increase in 19.3% over 2 years, environment and the animals up just over 18%, and education up 14.3%. So giving to religion is basically about flat. There's a slight increase in current dollars, but when you look at inflation-adjusted dollars, it was flat. It's 29% of donations. It's $128 billion overall. Education remains strong. It's 14% of the total overall. It went up 12.1% to $64 billion. And education is at the highest level ever in the reporting of Giving USA. In terms of human services, it's 12% of the overall total. It increased by 5%. It's at $56 billion. And human services, too, is seeing its highest level in the history of the report. In terms of foundations, foundations are 12% overall. It's an increase of 2.5%. It's $53.5 billion, and again, led by a couple of mega gifts and mega bequests, led primarily by Barron Hilton. In terms of health, it's 9% overall. It's an increase of 6.8%. It's at $41.46 billion. And consistent with the past, a lot of investment in health has to do with medical research. But something new in 2019 over the previous years is investment in new medical centers. So in 2019, there was capital investment in medical centers in addition to the research. Public society benefit is like the United Way. It's the Jewish Federation. It's advocacy organizations. But most notably right now, it is the commercial donor advised funds. And that has prompted the greatest growth in public society benefit. It's 8% of the total overall. It grew 13.1%. It's just over $37 billion. And public society benefit also is in its highest year ever. Arts, culture, and the humanities is 5% of the total. It's an increase of 12.6%. It's at $21.6 billion. It too is at its highest level. And the growth in arts, culture, and humanity in 1 year and 2 years has largely been driven also by high net worth individuals who are returning to some of their giving patterns from before. In terms of international affairs, it's 6% of the total. Basically, this was stagnant, a slight decline at $28.89 billion. And the decline is largely because of fewer international disasters and more disasters and more issues that are being funded within the United States.
Hey, Richard, we got a question asking if you could define the public society benefit or provide an example of what it is.
Public society benefit is like the United Way. That's a big component of the United Way. It's the Jewish federations. And then in terms of like advocacy groups, it tends to be policy groups that advocate for policy changes in a number of different areas. So it's not a 501c4, but these are all 501c3s, but they may have a policy or advocacy role. And then think tanks are generally in this category as well. But the biggest growth in this category is coming about because of commercial donor advised funds. So like Fidelity and Vanguard and Schwab and those, that's what's really pumping this increase in terms of public society benefit.
Thank you.
All right. As we look at environment and the animals, that also has increased. That has gone up 3%, or that is 3% of the total overall. It has gone up 11%, and it's at $14.16 billion. This is largely led by high net worth individuals going back to some of the causes that they have supported traditionally, maybe moving a bit away from human services, and also a younger demographic of donor supporting environmental and animal issues. So as you look at the trends over 1980 to 2019 in 5-year increments, you can see that giving to religion has gone down significantly. So that's gone down from 56% to 30%. Education has increased. Human services has stayed basically the same. Foundations have increased. Health has increased slightly. Same with public society benefit, even though we've seen significant growth in the most recent years because of donor advised funds. Arts, culture, and humanities has increased a bit. International affairs and environment, animal organizations have seen significant increase, in part because they haven't been measured all over this period of time. That measurement is a bit of a truncated period of looking at those. So why is giving up? Well, first, the gross domestic product is strong. And of giving, it's 2.1% of gross domestic product in 2019. That's slightly ahead of the average of previous years, where it has been about 2% average in previous years. The Standard & Poor's index in the stock market was up. It was a strong year for the market. This has allowed individuals, foundations, and corporations all to give more. High net worth individuals are moving more into their donor advised funds and their family foundations or individual foundations. Corporations' bottom lines are looking quite good, and foundation investment funds, investment of their corpus has grown significantly. So that has helped to drive giving across the board. Disposable personal income is up. It is up, and the average is 1.9% in 2019 of the gross domestic product giving in terms of philanthropic giving. The growth rate in 2019 was about 4.3%, And in previous years, in the previous year, 2018 over 2017, it was 6.1%. And then giving as a percentage of corporate pre-tax profits went up. 1% of corporate pre-tax profits goes to charitable giving. The highest has been 2%. The average over this period of time is about 1.1%. And this year we're just a little bit behind the average rate overall. And competition is increasing. So the number of nonprofit organizations is increased to 1.33 million nonprofit organizations. That's an increase of 3.2% in 2019 over 2018. And that 3.2% is the average growth rate in the number of nonprofits since 2011, 2012, and 2013. So what do all these numbers mean, and how do we look at these for our fundraising strategies? As we said earlier, 2018 was a year of complexity. It was a year of uncertainty and very little growth. There was a decline, frankly, in giving when it was adjusted for inflation, and there was a lot of issues and concerns with regard to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. In 2019, Courtney, you have something to add? Yep.
We have one more quick question. What was the percentage of total giving is contributed by high net worth individuals? I saw some corporations in there, but it wasn't specific to high net worth.
Individual giving overall is 70%. Then when you add bequests and family foundations, it goes up to 86%. I have to say I am not positive of that 70%. Or of the 86% comes from high net worth individuals specifically. But there's a great report, which is the Bank of America high net worth report that comes out every year. That probably has some more detail, or that comes out every other year. I have to admit, I don't know the statistic on that.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. So there was a strong market, there was strong consumer confidence, and there was kind of an acceptance of financial, political, and social environment. And what I mean by that acceptance is that we saw an uptick in certain type of giving in 2016, 2017, in terms of women's issues, in terms of minority issues, or ethnic diversity issues, in terms of environment, in terms of immigration. That kind of leveled off a bit in 2019. I have a feeling that that's going to return to being very active in 2020. Again, in 2019, there are no major changes in tax laws, and there was a positive momentum throughout the year. So individual giving has rebounded, but there are fewer donors giving larger gifts. So, what used to be that the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your revenue came from 20% of your donors, is now 90-10 or 95-5. It's fueled by giving of high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals. So over the years, there's been a discussion about the democratization of philanthropy, and with increased opportunity to give online and kind of a ubiquitous opportunity to give at various activities and events, does that mean that more people at all ends of the spectrum are going to be able to contribute? Well, yes, that activity has picked up and online giving is growing, but still the top of the pyramid is getting tighter. And we're looking at more revenue coming from fewer and fewer people. One of the issues is also about retention. And retention currently averages about 45%, and it's flat or declining. But a statistic that, frankly, I didn't know until recently was that at over a 5-year period, retention goes up to 80%. So I think that really is something we need to take into consideration about our strategies, particularly about communicating with prospects, donors, and past donors. So we need to be able to take advantage of kind of newish tools and strategies to bolster individual giving. Outside of pure philanthropy, there's social impact, there's impact investing and social enterprise opportunities. We've talked about the growth in donor advised fund, and continuing in 2020, more money was put into donor advised funds, more money came out of donor advised funds to go to nonprofit organizations. So great growth in that. growth in terms of individual and family foundations, but also a full array of plan giving tools that are available to us to use with our prospects and donors. And I think that really speaks to our ability as development people to be able to help coach and advise, not in a formal advisory way, but coach and advise our prospects and donors how to optimize their giving using a variety of giving tools: donor advised fund, plan giving, foundations, individual and family foundations, outright giving, whatever it may be. There are a lot of new prospecting and research tools that are out there that are donor analytics and predictive analytics and artificial intelligence modeling. That certainly comes with an expense, but something to really look at, to not only to get to know our prospects and donors better, but to be able to look at our community more broadly and understand who in the community who are not our current donors could become our donors because of profiling and modeling. And I think our communication and engagement strategies really need to build a sense of community of constituents, prospect donors, and broader constituents around the organization to support the mission of the organization. Keep communicating with your donors. And again, this issue of retention growing from 45% to 80% over a 5-year period, it speaks to me to not disqualifying prospects and donors too soon, not just looking at libunts and sibunts, but continuing that maybe over a more extended period of time, and thinking about a 5-year time horizon versus a 1 to 2 year time horizon to move donors on to something else. We need to understand the impact and potential of changing donor demographics. There's a lot of research that's out there about the difference in giving of women versus men, of different ethnic or cultural groups, of people of different age. That information is really terrific and can help guide us as we are putting together segmentation strategies and communication, cultivation, and solicitation strategies. So I think those are all effective tools for us to use, again, as we want to get to know our prospects and donors better. But bottom line, we all know it comes down to an individual discussion and an individual strategy. So just because someone fits one gender or ethnic group or age demographic doesn't mean that they may give outside of the profile of that demographic. And focusing in on where return on investment is the best while building the base. Again, it's what was 80-20 is now 95-5. And we know that return on investment in terms of those high, large, major gifts, transformational gifts, legacy gifts is where we get the greatest return. But we have to build the base of future constituents. We have to build the base of future donors as well. But there's a lot of research about kind of that upper middle range where organizations are tending to not pay enough attention to them. And I think that there's good potential, maybe a bit below that top 10% or that top 15%, down to maybe 25 or 30%, where there's good opportunity with people who have significant wealth to engage them with the organization. And frankly, not so many organizations are looking at them. So they're not, quote unquote, the usual suspects who everyone is looking at. In terms of foundations, giving to and by foundations was both up. In 2018, giving to foundations was down. This is because there's a strong economy, so there's more money to give to foundations, and there's more money for foundations to give away. But a lot of this has to do with income and wealth inequality and the creation of individual and family foundations by high net worth and uber high net worth individuals. So how does that impact our fundraising strategy? I think one key advice is to get to know your local community foundations. We said that of all the foundations, community foundations saw the greatest growth. They are seeing significant growth in donor advised funds when people choose not to put them into commercial funds, but look at more of a community focus through a local community foundation. So dealing with the San Diego Foundation and actively communicating with and advocating with them is an important strategy. And look at your foundations as proactive partners. more and more foundations want you to come to that early stages of program development or early stages of organizational growth and transformation. Talk about your initiatives. Have them be a part of the market research that you're doing. Have them be a part of the overall design and plan going forward, and work with them to craft the right proposal that's the most likely to be successful. But getting involved and engaged early on, as opposed to when the plan is completely cooked and you're ready to move forward with just a proposal. So corporate giving has seen significant growth for a second year. That's fueled in large part by corporate pre-tax profits and good earnings ratios for corporations this last year. But I also think it's an increase in corporate social responsibility agenda. And many corporations in 2019, I believe, were starting to take a more active approach to social and political issues reflected in their giving, in their advertising, and in their positioning. And that's certainly true in 2020. You see so many companies in their advertising talking about, we're here with you. And the messaging around COVID particularly and some of the social unrest issues is very compelling. And I think that how we align with that is important. So leveraging corporate momentum and the growth in corporate giving overall, but then also beyond just philanthropy, beyond just grants, look at the corporate social responsibility and look for new opportunities in terms of sponsorships, cause-related marketing, in-kind giving, employee giving, and employee volunteerism. But remember, the philanthropic side of corporate giving is still only 5% overall of the total. So bequests are up, and the demographic who are doing their planned giving and their legacy giving continues to grow. So actively pursue planned giving as a part of your strategy to optimize giving from your individual prospects and donors. So I think it's important for us to diversify the types of donors that we're working with and the types of gifts. So look at individuals donor advised funds, family foundations, individual foundations, maybe they're closely held businesses. Look at corporations, but not just for pure philanthropy, but in terms of sponsorship and corporate social responsibility. Look at foundations and the different type of foundations, including community foundations and the donor advised funds that they house. Continue to grow bequests by talking to people and providing them the opportunity to give through their bequest. It's time to intensify communications, which I'm sure you're all doing in times of COVID anyhow. Research and qualification, we want to know more about who our prospects and donors are, and then who in the universe outside our current family of prospects and donors could likely become prospects and donors for us. And then meaningful engagement. Engagement isn't just about being invited to this cocktail party or going to that gala or getting this newsletter. More and more people want individually curated engagement experiences. And I think that's really important for us to take into consideration because that is a good measure of cultivation. It's a good measure of stewardship. So how we engage our prospects and donors in ways that are meaningful to them and help them to understand our mission, values, and impact is important to pursue. So focus on alignment of mission and vision and values is important, and impact, and looking at aligning the mission and vision and values of our organizations with those of our donors. And together, talking about the impact that you have and donors will have in the organization and in the community and in their own lives. Look for meaningful strategic dialogue, just as you are looking for individualized, meaningful, and strategic engagement. This dialogue is important as well. All of us as development professionals sit around our offices a lot and look at the research and come up with strategies for engagement and cultivation and solicitation. And we're wondering how and when to do it. Bottom line, ask your donors. Ask them how they want to be communicated with, what is an appropriate time frame for solicitation? How do they want to be solicited? Is it a formal proposal or is it a conversation? Who should be in the room when we're having that conversation? How do you want to be asked? So having that dialogue with your donors, in my mind, is just a respectful way to advance that relationship, aligning how their preferences come along with your strategies. Be more sophisticated about donor issues and options. We talked a lot about options and how to optimize giving, but issues, particularly now in times of COVID, in times of unemployment and economic challenges, political issues, social issues, it's important to know about our donor issues as we're speaking with them. And optimize giving over time. You may have prospects and donors who clearly have the capability of giving $10 million or $25 million, but they're giving you $10,000 or $25,000 now. It's rather difficult to move them from $10,000 to $10 million in one step. So think about taking those incremental steps along the way to move them from 10,000 to 100,000 to 250,000 to $1 million, and growing from there. What that allows you to do is over a period of time, one, ultimately get to their capacity gift and likely exceed their capacity gift, but you're continuing to grow that relationship and refine your strategies and working with your donor to really individualize their giving in a way that grows their giving overall. So I like to talk a lot about rigor and discipline. I like good plans and multi-year plans and the effective implementation and execution of plans. But this is also a time for flexibility and agility. We moved from uncertainty and complexity in 2018 to 2019, which was more stability and strength. We know now we're going back to that time of uncertainty and complexity. A couple of other stats as I segue into a discussion about fundraising in time of COVID. In a recent survey, 73% of charities worldwide said that they had seen a decline in their giving. And 50% of those who were surveyed expected that decline in revenue, in philanthropic revenue, to be well over 20% and extend beyond this fiscal year or calendar year, potentially into next. Alternatively, on the individual donor side, 53% of donors said that they will continue to give. They will maintain their giving, but they are likely to be a bit more cautious. So that may mean it's a slightly smaller gift that's paid over an extended period of time. They're a little slower in making that decision and structuring that gift, but 53% say that they will maintain with a bit more caution. 28% said they're just going to maintain, and 20% said they may not give until the economy recovers. But bottom line, the way I read that is that 81% of our prospects and donors are saying that they're going to maintain their giving. Older donors are more likely to maintain giving than younger. 66% of baby boomers say that they're going to keep it up, 40% of millennials. 53% of our donors are saying that they are not experiencing financial challenges at this time. 72% of baby boomers say that they are not experiencing financial challenges. So we need to take that into consideration. And when it comes to individuals and foundations, you can look at those type of companies that are seeing significant growth during this period of time and maybe focus your attention on those for a while as well. And a final stat, 66% of those interviewed said that nonprofits are doing a good or excellent job in addressing health, economic, and social issues. That's up from 48% just 9 months ago. So in my mind, that speaks to the issue of confidence in the nonprofit sector in a time of challenge. And I think that's a real opportunity for us as we are looking at continuing our fundraising in this challenging year, and ideally, again, expanding our fundraising in the years going forward. So bottom line, why is 2019 important? Why are we sitting here having this discussion about 2019 when we know kind of all conventional wisdom has gone out of the window in 2020? Couple of things. Number one is momentum. We had strong momentum from 2019 coming into this year, and that gave us a very positive base upon which to start. And history is a great teacher, particularly as you look at 9/11, but more recently in terms of the Great Recession. Our donors have great resiliency. The American donor is prone to resiliency, and recovery can happen quickly. And as you know, from 2008, 2009 to today, there's been a steady growth over that period of time. We have well exceeded pre-recession giving levels, and we are now achieving our newest, highest levels of giving overall. And people right now can't volunteer as much. They can't come to your concerts. They're not coming to your galas. There's a lot of things that they are not able to do that would be normal for them to show their support and their financial and contribute financially to your organization. But they have still a desire to give, a desire to be involved, and a desire to make a difference. So if giving financially is one of the ways that they can show your support for their organization when they can't volunteer or attend your events, give them the opportunity to give at this time. So as we move from the discussion about Giving USA to the discussion of giving in challenging times, when we started planning this discussion, we were going to talk about what to do in times of COVID and what to do in times of market volatility. But now we're dealing, yes, with COVID and new increases in COVID and changes about how we're responding to COVID. There's continued economic concern, there's social unrest, and there's increased political tension, both domestically and internationally. And things can change by the week and by the day. Courtney?
Awesome. Yeah, can you repeat or share the source of the survey that you just shared?
Let me see. Why don't I look that up? I don't have it right in front of me. Let me see here. I don't have it right in front of me. Part of it was Charities Aid Foundation. The first part, when we were looking at the number of nonprofit the number of nonprofit organizations that are experiencing challenges, that came from the Charities Aid Foundation. The second one was published by a company called Dunham and Company based in Dallas, and you can just Google Dunham. They commissioned research from a market research firm, but Dunham, like us, is a fundraising consulting firm. They're more on the marketing side than the fundraising side. They commissioned that work. Again, Dunham and Company, and you can go online and look at it.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So we know things change by the week. They change by the day. And as again, we started to talk about COVID, but now we're talking so many different issues. So as we're looking at fundraising and communications in these turbulent times, just a few key points that I think we all ideally are practicing now, but certainly to remember as things continue to move forward. First is to commit to continued and consistent communications with all of our constituents. And that's both internal and external. Show how the organization is addressing and handling issues and challenges of COVID-19, demonstrating sensitivity to the needs and concerns of your employees, your volunteers, your constituents who you serve, your audience, your community, as well as your prospects and donors. It's time, as we all at the beginning of the COVID challenge and shelter in place had conversations that were more check-ins. How are you doing? How are things going? Anything I can do to help? It now needs to shift to meaningful conversations, because I believe a lot of those check-in conversations are happening with friends and family and colleagues across the board. Now shifting to more meaningful conversations about our organizations is important. It's important to be positive, because nonprofit organizations exist to make life better. And in a time of crisis, they can be a respite from fear and anxiety. Sharing positive messages and images about the work that you are doing reminds people of the good you bring to the world, and that you will be there for them now and in the future. So be positive, but be realistic. Share what your unique, proactive responses are to COVID. Share your positioning on social issues and the current social issues, maybe not the political, but social issues that are before us. If you are in a positive financial situation, talk about that, because that is something that will give donors confidence about continuing to invest in you. We have one client who has very healthy books, even though they're not generating revenue right now. they have a healthy cash reserve, they have an innovation fund. And they are talking about the business model and the effective planning that has led them to this position of strength now. And that's really resonating with their donors. So their donors are confident about being able to invest in that organization. But if you're having financial challenges, there are a lot of organizations who are looking at investing specifically into operations to keep organizations afloat. Generally, we don't advise organizations to have that kind of last stand appeal that, we need your money to survive. But frankly, that's a message that you can share now, because that survival is less about management of your organization and more around the environment in which you are raising money. So there's also an opportunity to share beauty in times of a challenge. We have a environmental firm that we work with, and they sent out a lovely piece that they've repeated it a couple times that showed the desert moving from spring to summer and just reminded people of their mission of preserving the desert. It was a beautiful piece. It wasn't a direct solicitation, but they received a lot of resources for it. And emphasize community impact. It may be different than it was before, and how you are delivering your products and services and how you're achieving impact, but you're still achieving impact. We need to be sensitive to personal issues. We need to personalize our communications whenever possible. Now, that should be a strategy that we practice anyhow, whether that's in one-on-one conversation or in the segmentation of our direct response messaging. So again, communication and personalized communication is important in good times and bad. But now as you're communicating with people who maybe are in a higher risk group or members of their family you can talk about good messages for their good and continued health. That's the same with regard to personal issues related to business challenges, to unemployment, to social unrest. But we need to be sensitive and careful about the use of appropriate language as we are talking particularly about some of the social issues confronting us today. We want to be aware of donors' concerns. Donors may be a bit nervous about the volatility in the market, although it's been up fairly recently, so there may be some confidence in that. But there's still volatility in the market, as we've seen last week. There's still the issue of unemployment. There's a continuing wave of COVID and a second wave anticipated in the fall. The social issues that are before us are very complex. So people may want to delay their decision on giving gifts. They may want to slow down their pledges. They may want to structure their gifts in more complex ways using multiple assets or legacy tools. So it's important for us to be open and listening to that and being aware of their concerns and looking to align their giving patterns, their concerns, their communications with those sensitivities that they may have. Some organizations are moving from their philanthropy from arts and culture and environment and animals back to basic human needs. Some are moving away from capital investments to direct service or operational sustainability. So know about that as well, so you can appeal to the donors in an appropriate way. And if you had a capital ask in front of someone and now they're giving direct service or operational sustainability, number one, there may be opportunities for you to raise money around that operational sustainability. But number two, you want to proactively say that we can put our capital request on hold if you can, in fact, do that. So don't be opportunistic, be authentic. Be authentic and genuine in your communications and your appeals for funds that serve populations in need. If your organization provides direct services that are increasingly critical at this time, then talk about that and appeal for funds for those services with a deference to the pandemic and to the market and social issues before us, but it's okay to ask. Acknowledge that COVID exists. Acknowledge what the public is dealing with. Don't let it go. I'm getting a number of political solicitations for candidates and issues that don't even acknowledge what's going on. And I find that pretty offensive, that there's not some deference to the issues and concerns that are before us today. So this also means raising money for the right things. This means raising money for priorities that are aligned with your mission. It's not seizing opportunities to raise cash for new initiatives that aren't aligned with your mission because there's cash to be had in certain areas. If an ask has been made, don't ignore it. Ambiguity is never good in fundraising. It's not good for your prospects and donors. It's not good for the organization. Now, how you close that loop is going to be a little bit different between those who are really close to you, those who are a little further away. If it's an annual fund gift, if it's a major gift, if it's a transformational gift, if it's a legacy gift. Talk to them and ask them if they want to continue that conversation, or when they want to continue the conversation, not if, but when, and be sensitive to that timing. But we're seeing a lot of things open up already. Individuals, foundations, corporations increasing their giving from where they were 2 months ago. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to have that conversation. This is the time also to get your fundraising house in order. So look at those back office responsibilities that always get to the bottom of the pile and no one ever wants to do because we're out there too busy with our prospects and donors and actively fundraising. So this is the time to clean up the database, to get those contact reports done, to look at performance reporting, refresh our marketing materials, look at our plans and see if they are still valid going forward and how can we refine those plans. So look internally at some of the operational and infrastructure issues that you can be addressing. In challenging times comes innovation. In the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, we saw a lot of change in profiles of nonprofit organizations. They became leaner and meaner organizations. They increased the number of partnerships and alliances that they were in. They changed their service delivery mechanisms. They explored new ways of communicating. It was about survival. Well, today it may be about survival as well. So this is the time to think creatively and boldly and proactively and possibly look beyond the nonprofit sector or the specific sector that you are in of arts and culture and health and human services. Look beyond kind of your usual group that you compare against and look at some aspirational institutions, both nonprofit and for-profit, to learn from. The American donor is amazingly resilient. We talked about the recovery after 2008, 2009, and the steady growth of giving overall. People of all means continue to give. If they can't give financially, they are also giving by being with their neighbor, calling family and friends. So a lot of the giving that is going on right now may be very much more personal and person to person through a virtual environment. So let's celebrate and recognize and applaud the many ways that people are continuing to explore and generate their generosity. I talked a little bit before about discipline and rigor. Well, I love discipline and rigor. I love a well-done plan, but we have to have that flexibility and agility to move forward in response to challenges and opportunities. It's very challenging right now to plan a year out or 6 months out. I had a client who was trying to get into her strategic planning process, and she just had, a block against it. And she was saying, "What's the matter? How come I'm not being able to get my strategic plan thought out? Have that facilitated discussion with my board." Well, it's really difficult right now. That 3-year horizon, may be a year horizon. It may be 6 months. The plan and the playbook may no longer be relevant. And we may now have to be thinking about how we are executing activities and tactical activities on a month-by-month basis, if not a week-by-week basis. So in my mind, it requires a new way of thinking and a new way of behaving. It means more intensive and frequent interaction with your colleagues within the organization and external to the organization. As we're all having virtual meetings, I'm sure you're all finding that they're much more efficient and much more focused. And you may, in fact, be communicating with some people more frequently, but again, with that focus. So intensive, frequent interaction internally and externally, disengaging autopilot. This is not just the routine implementation of the plans that have been put forward. We have to rethink of the way we're doing things. So disengaging that autopilot and being very present in the meetings and the conversations. As we were working with our clients, again, it's no longer ticking the boxes in terms of performance against a plan. It is thinking about the strategy for next week or next month and how we need to continue to move forward in a very adaptable way. And finally, creative, innovative thinking is something to take into consideration now. We talked about this as the time for innovation, but it's the time for creativity as well. And it's the time to take risks. It's not business as usual. It's time to try some new things. Be willing to take some risks. If you're not willing to take risks now, in these times of all this turmoil and challenge, I don't know when would be a better time to do it. So be open to take risks and see what can evolve from those. So from the Giving USA information overall, and then this discussion about fundraising in turbulent times, a couple of points of summary. Number one, always emphasize and be true to your mission. Be consistent and proactive in your communications. Be open to and explore options. Of course, that's in your programs and services in your business model, but particularly in partnership with your donors to sustain their giving now in this time and prepare them for the future. It's important for us to work on sustaining giving now. Don't give up. Don't resign to defeat. We may not make our goals, but we can still have fundraising success in this time. And prepare for life after COVID. Prepare for life when things are economically, socially, and politically better, so that you are ready to get out there and move and really take an opportunity with those better times. And finally, emphasize, articulate impact, and align the mission, vision, and values of the organization with the passion of your prospects and donors. Because together, you can continue to increase impact and achieve impact for the community, which is ever more important for our donors. So that is the presentation overall with regard to Giving USA and this discussion on fundraising in turbulent times. In the next couple of days, we're going to be sending you out a graphic of the Giving USA presentation. It's a cool one-page graphic. And then we'll be sending you an article about the key points that I talked about in fundraising in turbulent times. So with that, I will turn it over to Courtney, and we'll open it up for some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. I jotted down a lot of information. Especially, I loved the not forgetting that core group of donors that are kind of in the middle. I think that's so important. We did get a question in, and it says, do election years have any effect on giving, with this year being an election year?
Research shows and historical analysis shows that giving to nonprofits in time of an election year does not decrease. So people give out of different pockets when they are giving to political candidates or to issues. It does not generally impact their philanthropic giving. I do think that what we are going to see this year, we're probably seeing it now with all the things that are going on, but people are increasing their giving to causes that may be aligned with some of the political issues of today, the social issues of today. So you are probably seeing a more active kind of giving, charitable giving, aligned with some of the challenges that we're facing today.
Wonderful, thank you. Checking if we have any other questions. If you have any other questions, you can use the raise hand on the participants, or you can write it in the chat box and we will be sure to answer it.
So I'll add one point while you're taking some time to get some questions, is that I talked about don't be afraid to ask, and to close the loop of it as if an ask is out there. The environment for that is changing on a week-by-week basis. We had clients, and we have clients all over the country and all different sectors. We had clients who, 8 weeks ago were scared to death to talk to their donors other than having these casual check-ins. if asks were outstanding, they were hesitant to close that loop. We really coached them to have those conversations because, as I said earlier, ambiguity is not good in the mind of your donor. It's not good in the mind of the organization. And you can take off the table saying, how about we resume our conversation in the fall? But if you want some more information or if you want to continue the dialogue now, certainly we will. But now today, what we're seeing is we've got one client right now who's preparing for a $60 million ask. It's going to be in person. So they already are setting the stage with appropriate social distancing, how they're going to manage the transportation, all of that. But they're proceeding with a $60 million ask, and the lead donor is well into his 80s. But they're taking the precautions to do that, and the donor wants to make this happen, and it's an ever more relevant gift today than it was a couple of months ago. We have another one who's working on a $10 million institutional ask. That donor said that they are reframing their giving right now from capital projects to current need or operational support. But they continue to do that, but they're lightening up a little bit on their capital. So they are not probably going to give that gift in this calendar year, but they want to have the proposal in hand in fourth quarter. So as decisions are made on capital investments right after the new year, they're ready to go. So continuing that conversation at all levels, it's easier at the lower levels when you're having an annual fund appeal, but at all levels, I think is important.
Wonderful. Thank you. And with that follow-up, we did have someone who asked about making donor solicitation calls through Zoom. Have you had any experience or your clients recently with it? And can you share any stories about it?
I think people are getting more and more comfortable with Zoom. And so people are proceeding with solicitations through Zoom. Again, the client that I talked about that was the $10 million institutional ask, there's probably a weekly meeting between the CEO, the Chief Development Officer, the Program Officer, and the CEO of that foundation. And it's moving that cultivation along just as you would, that would have likely been a combination of in-person meetings and phone conversations and email dialogue. So people are becoming more comfortable with Zoom. Zoom is proving to be more effective than phone because you can have greater personal interaction and you can watch for reactions. And if you need to take a silence break while you're allowing your prospect and donor to think and respond without you responding first, it's easier to do that with Zoom. And if there are more people in the conversation than just two, Zoom is also easier because you can designate who is going to go next, or it's just a little bit easier to hand that conversation off from person to person. But it again comes down to asking your donor how they want to proceed and asking them, are you comfortable with proceeding with this conversation via Zoom or phone, or would you like to do it in writing, or do you want to wait? Mm-hmm. But we're having success. And again, what that looks like today versus 2 months ago is way different. People were hesitant a couple of months ago, but it's working fine now.
Wonderful. We have another question that says, thank you for the great presentation. Lots of people are saying that, so thank you, Richard. But someone says, one of the charts showed that the corporate giving represented 9.5% of total giving. However, they thought they heard you say 5% later. Do you think corporations will continue to give more?
It is 5%. So if I said something about 9, I was wrong. That could have been it grew 13%, but overall corporate giving is 5%. Okay. Now that's philanthropic giving either through, grants from the company and their philanthropic arm or through their foundation. When you look at sponsorships and matching funds, corporate giving expands beyond that 5%. So this is they're purely philanthropic money. Will corporations continue to increase their giving? That's completely, in my mind, dependent on, first and foremost, what happens to GDP, the economy, corporate pre-tax profits. But that, in many sectors, that's looking pretty good. Obviously, I think you need to really look at what sector your corporate funders are in, because some sectors are growing significantly, some are really challenged, and it would be completely, inappropriate to have that conversation with them now. But I do think I've been so impressed in watching the commercials, COVID-related commercials or Black Lives Matter-related commercials or other things that are going on right now about the call for solidarity, and speaking to the customer about we're there for you and we're there for the community. I think alignment with that corporate social responsibility agenda, and hopefully that's going to allow or not allow, it's going to incentivize corporations to continue to give more, because they want to be speaking to their clients. They want to be speaking to their customers, and demonstrating that through philanthropy, through corporate social responsibility, advertising and marketing is a way that we can all benefit by kind of attaching to those opportunities that they're exploring.
Wonderful. We have another question that says, of the presentation today, what do you think is the most important for them to take back to their board? So maybe the most, top 3 most important things that they can take away and let their board know to learn from.
I would say number 1 is that individuals account for 86% of giving overall in the United States. And that remains consistent. Mm-hmm. And while there is significant growth in foundation giving, a lot of it from individuals and their individual foundations, number 1, it's about the individual and that dialogue with individuals, and the dialogue around major gifts and planned gifts with individual is the most important. Number 2, it is appropriate to have those conversations now. Don't keep deferring. We don't know when things are going to settle down, and people want to have that opportunity to give. So do it in an appropriate manner that's respectful of not only the personal issues your prospects and donors may be going to, but the societal issues that we're going through right now, but continue to talk about that. And 3, stay attuned to and aligned with your mission. Fortunately, we haven't had many clients. We've had 1 or 2 that felt that there was an opportunity to raise money, and a lot of money, from some kind of national campaigns that, they're more social media oriented, could expand their prospect base and their donor base, but there wasn't real tight mission alignment. And I advised them against it because it would seem, in my mind, way too opportunistic. So stick close to your mission. Talk about how your mission is relevant to today. And frankly, whether you're an arts organization or an environmental organization or an animal welfare organization or basic health and human services, there is relevance to what you are doing today. And so talking about how your mission relates to the issues that we're dealing with today, I think is really important.
Wonderful. We have one more that says, we have seen an influx of new donors during this crisis period. What recommendations do you have regarding retaining these crisis donors as long-term donors? And I'm really glad someone asked this, because as a fundraiser and working with other nonprofits and supporting people, you see this a lot. I mean, a couple of years ago when it was the immigration, I worked very closely with a nonprofit that saw a huge increase in donations that year, but unfortunately the next year it didn't happen. And same thing we saw with Planned Parenthood and a lot of other great organizations. But I'm glad this person asked that. What do you recommend to retain these crisis donors?
Well, I think it's about mission and messaging and stewardship. And then I think it's about keeping in mind what I said about retention over a period of time. Now, as happened in 2008, 2009, in 2008, 2009 in terms of human services organization, or 2016 in terms of Planned Parenthood or immigration or the environment, there was a big uptick. I can remember working with Planned Parenthood during that time, and they were so concerned about their ability to retain those donors, and they had a really pretty amazing retention rate into the 2nd and 3rd years. And that was because of just continued communication, appropriate communication, not pestering and so constant, but appropriate communication, continued alignment with mission, and trying to use various research and analytical tools and segmentation strategies to really get to know their prospect and donor more personally. Obviously, if you're meeting with them and talking to them in person, you're going to get to know them personally. But how can you drill down in terms of your direct response appeals, to be able to target them in a way that resonates to the issues at hand? And then communicate when there's something in the environment, in the economy that is related to that issue. In addition to your anchor direct response mailings or email or social media posts, you also have to have the ability to react if there's some issue that's coming up that's related to your cause. So that messaging, that targeting, that kind of understanding who our prospects and donors are, and really personalizing your messaging to them is important. And remember when I talked about the engagement strategies, which whether that's cultivation or stewardship, it's personalized engagement strategies. Now that may be hard to do, but bottom line, if you think about taking a concierge approach to personalized dialogue and engagement activities and events for your donors, that's going to help to retain them. And finally, I would just say that while certain social causes may be at the forefront now as they were in 2016, and maybe you've seen some off-tick of that, continuing to stay in touch with those prospects and donors, not giving up on them too soon. Because again, from 45% one-year retention to 80% over a 5-year period, I frankly wouldn't take anybody out. Learning that information, I wouldn't take anybody out of my kind of cultivation and solicitation cycle, or my communication, cultivation, and solicitation cycle before 5 years, unless they explicitly told me they weren't going to give any more.
Okay. We actually, speaking about the 80% retention rate, we have a question if you could explain a little bit more about the 80% retention rate over the 5-year statistic.
Well, in the first year, you're going to retain 45% of your donors from the previous year. So you have, what you're doing is kind of churning through your donors. And we know that that's very expensive. And it's much more expensive to acquire new donors than sustain your current donors. But, so that's 1 year, a change of 1 year, you're going to lose 55% of your donors. But if you look over a 5-year period of time, those donors who gave in year 1 are going to give again sometime over that 5-year period. So that retention moves up to 80% over that 5-year period. One of our clients now has really started to open up their direct response solicitations. They're, again, through email or social media. They also do a good amount of direct mail. And they decided to stop focusing just on those prospects or just on those donors of the last 2 years, so the Libans and the current donors. And they really looked at a wider horizon and really took a 10-year kind of swath of their donors and started to get them more active in that cultivation and solicitation process. And they were just amazed at how many donors who hadn't given for 3 or 4 years came back. So I don't know if 5 years is that magic number, but I really would urge you to think about eliminating donors too soon and keeping them kind of in that communication cycle for a 5-year period if you can afford to do that.
Wonderful. And we have one more question, and this is more of kind of a San Diego one. Someone had asked if there is a way to hone in on this type of report to evaluate philanthropy in San Diego. And I do know UCSD with the Nonprofit Institute offers each year an annual look into actual San Diego's very similar giving type of report. So I encourage for those of you that want to know more information like this about San Diego, you go ahead and check out UCS. Oh, not UC. Yeah. I keep saying UCSD. Yeah. It's USD. USD, and they do a great job with that information.
Yep, that's what I would say too. the Giving USA is national. They don't zero in on a particular geography, but University of San Diego has great reports and great resources available to you.
Wonderful. I think we are done with questions. I don't see any more that came in. So Richard, thank you so much for being with us today and taking your time to present this to us. And hopefully
Thank
you
you
are
all.
staying cool.
Thank you all, and I look forward to next year when we can do this in person. And again, we'll be following up with a graphic of the Giving USA presentation and an article for you to look at for fundraising in challenging times.
Wonderful. Thanks, Richard.
All right, thank you all.
Bye.